Hey, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to Recovering Out Loud, the podcast where we talk about raw, unfiltered truth about addiction and fight for freedom. Today's guest is John C., sober since June 3rd, 2024. John gets into his 25 years of chasing highs, battling ego, finding redemption through humility and spirituality, from losing a college scholarship to rebuilding his life. John's story is in a roller coaster of grit and grace. Plus, in today's episode, we're tackling a listener's burning question. How do you support someone whose ego is sabotaging their sobriety? Performing in recovery versus practicing recovery. If you like the show, please subscribe and follow on all social media platforms at Recovering Out Loud Pod. If you have a topic or question you'd like discussed on the show, please send us a message on any of these platforms. We appreciate you. Johnny C., how you doing, buddy?
Not bad at all.
Thank you so much for coming down here. I know it was a bit of a hike, so it's good to have you here. I really appreciate you, man. You sent me a message while we were doing this, and you basically said that, you enjoyed the material, the podcast, and it was helping you. And, we love those messages. We get quite a few of them. And, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I heard the guy that does Diary of a CEO. I don't know if you guys heard that
Yeah,
podcast.
I've heard a couple.
I forget his name. Just bring the mic a little bit closer to your face there. Yeah, we want to hear your beautiful voice. There you go. He said he measures the success of his podcast by the amount and length of messages that he gets from people. And I love that. It's like you're
How
actually
detailed they are.
right.
Yeah.
And like you're actually affecting people
Mm-hmm.
by putting this stuff out. And, I try not to think in monetary success, and my ego has other plans usually, which we'll get into in this episode because I want to talk about that. We got a really beautiful message, which I'll read from one of our listeners. But first, I want to hear, tell the audience a little bit about your story and how you got into recovery. And
Okay, so my name's John. My sober date is June 3rd, 2024. And I have been pretty much an addict and an alcoholic for most of my life. And my story is one, sometimes I actually think, is my story like dark, or is it
enough, yeah.
compared to some of the ones that we hear, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. I'd be thinking that sometimes too.
But truthfully, I had a great childhood. If you think about it, son of two immigrant parents, played sports all my life growing up, and I was just lived in a great neighborhood, went to Catholic school, elementary and high school. But I think that, a lot of the time, I just felt like I was always trying to be someone I wasn't. And I never really felt authentic at any point. I kind of went which way the wind was going. If the kids from the neighborhood were making choices that I knew were wrong, I would still kind of follow in that path. And unfortunately for me, when I used to get caught, which was 9 times out of 10, the punishment was always pretty severe. I come from an Italian household where sometimes the punishment didn't fit the crime. And so, I was, I need to prefix this by saying if I could be half the father my dad was, I'd be an amazing dad. But at the same time, like I got pretty beat up. And I used to think that that was gonna be my life, and a lot of the time that forced me into lying, that forced me into trying to get away with shit, that and that started what I have learned now to transform those characteristics of being not authentic, right? And when I think back, constantly having to lie and to try to be somebody else is a huge component to why I chose to escape my reality using drugs and alcohol. And at the age of 15, I remember my first time taking ecstasy, and for like 6, 7 hours, I was not me.
Mm.
And I chased that 6, 7 hours high that first time for the last 25 years.
Hmm.
So, going back a little bit, my first time trying alcohol was in the 7th grade. A friend of mine's parents went down south, and the parents brought back like a bottle of Cuban rum or Dominican rum or something like that. And me being the, you know, bigger kind of, I was always a lot taller, and I was captain of the basketball team, captain of the volleyball team,
I'm not surprised.
track and field, right? Star baseball player growing up. I felt like it was my duty at that party to fill the cup up with rum to the top.
Hmm.
And see, look at me, look what I could do. Took the whole cup of rum, and I don't remember the rest of the night, but I do remember the punishment.
Hmm.
And that stuck with me for a long time. So, high school came around, and right from the first day of high school, I felt a little bit inferior to some of the older kids. That desire to want to fit in burned so like I was just constantly wanting to hang out with the older kids, do what they were doing. And what were the older kids doing? Smoking cigarettes, skipping the bus and getting in cars and going for rides around the neighborhood and stuff like that. Even though I knew it was wrong and there was a punishment waiting for me at home, that's what I chose to do. But baseball was always my strongest sport growing up, and I ended up getting a scholarship to university. And after grade 12, um, I signed my letter of intent, and I went to the States to play baseball,
Hmm.
which wasn't really popular back in 98, 99. And I remember, in my household, it was like curfew, 11 o'clock. You're not home. Like I was home 11:30. Curfew was 12. I was home at 12. I was always trying to push the envelope. But when I went away from my first year of university, it was like letting a dog out of a cage,
Yeah.
right? It was like, and sure enough, freshman year, that's what they call first year in the States, freshman year, I was in Buffalo. So we would, load a car full of the girls basketball team, girls volleyball team, guys hockey team, some of my teammates in baseball. We'd load up a car and we would drive to Toronto, 2 hour drive, hour and a half, 2 hour drive, and we would party and then drive all the way back. And because I knew a couple people here in the club scene and stuff like that in my early years of university, like I felt like I was almost had
Significant.
something to
Yeah,
offer,
yeah.
And you guys were coming back here because of the age limit?
That's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Not only the age limit,
19
but
here.
back in 2000, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a nightclub on Sunday nights used to have $2 shots.
Hmm.
And $2 shots Canadian, these Americans were like, oh my God,
It's like 50 cents.
15 bucks, I'm off my rocker, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my, and then I gravitated towards that kind of acceptance, always trying to, um, and I was trying to always one up the weekend before. So there was a lot of trying to get creative with how we had fun, right?
Yeah. And like perform in front of an audience almost, right?
But the thing is, though, is that my focus when I was there in university was supposed to be about education and baseball, and partying took over right from and I was 18 at the time. So sure enough, I got I got my scholarship taken away because my grades suffered, and I saw that at a very early age in order to achieve something or to keep that scholarship or whatever, it would require work. My story, gentlemen, I'm the 51% effort kind of guy.
Yeah.
So if you look at all my report cards growing up, it was always John shows excellent, attributes and can really perform in a group setting, although he achieves below potential.
Potential.
ability.
That's what I was going to say. This word of potential for an addict and alcoholic is like the scariest word.
Right? Every single report card, John is achieving below potential ability. Because on the surface, when I went home, I had to play that person that gave a fuck. But at school, I just wanted to have fun. Right? So that, only gets you, natural ability only gets you so far. Eventually, you're going to have to put in some work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably why I would say that recovery for me today, relapse isn't a part of my story today, because for the first time in 40 plus years, I'm actually putting in the work. There's been some significant things that have happened in my life that you would think would say, okay, John, it's time to straighten up. It's time to get your shit together. I.e., relationships with girls, maybe marriage, having kids. And I actually verbally said it to myself. I'm like, all right, you got a kid on the way, or, you're getting married. Like it's time to straighten up, become a man. And I promised myself I would, but I just went deeper and deeper. It's a progressive disease, right?
Yeah.
So, until I met my now wife, I didn't have a DOC. It was just like, when was the next time you had to be responsible? So however long I had to be responsible, I would just, right, ecstasy, MDMA, cocaine, always alcohol, later in my 20s and well into my 30s. But I'm in the catering industry. I went to culinary arts school, so I could go out the night before, drink, take part in extracurriculars and still make it to work for 8 a.m. I wasn't the best version of myself, but I'm the 51% guy, remember?
You're still there.
So I could be there and give it 51%. So, what cocaine is the constant. And then there was always like those weekends where if I had a Saturday night off or something, I would give it a go and do like all day Saturday, go out Saturday night to the club after hours, go all day Sunday. Usually had Mondays off, and then try to figure it out, and then back at work on Tuesday. And that was my life from, 23, 24 until about a year ago. 42 now, going to be 43 in a month.
Nice. Yeah. And you're coming up on a year in June. You were just telling me about that. Congrats, man. That's huge.
It's huge, man.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot. There's a lot in there that I can relate with, the getting disciplined at a young age. And I've come to the realization too that I lie, cheat, and steal in life because I was always afraid of the consequence. Always. There was always a consequence waiting on the other side. And, I always say this, but my parents did the best they had with the tools that they had at the time.
100%.
The best they could with the tools they had at the time.
100%.
Something else you meant about potential. It's funny. I was told my whole entire life, you got lots of potential. You got lots of potential. And like, I always thought that was this great thing, like a great compliment. But I actually heard this the other night. I was at a meeting and I heard someone say that same thing. They're like, my parents told me my entire life, you have all this potential, you have all this potential. And then he started to realize once he started to go to recovery, he's like, it wasn't actually a compliment when you really think about it. They were telling me this because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. Yeah. So this guy, he described us the actual definition of potential. And it's just funny how, like, I remember the same feeling when my parents would be like, you have so much potential, kid. You could do this, you can do that. But they were telling me that because I was fucking up and I wasn't using my potential, right?
It was like a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You're here and you could be here, right?
Yeah.
It's like could, should, would. It's like those dangerous words, right?
And I would think, oh, I got potential though. Like, I'm
Yeah.
good. I got potential, right? And I would use that one and really slide with it.
Yeah. But meanwhile, it's like, yeah, you could be here, right? You
Yeah.
could be. And a lot of people come into recovery and they kind of reach their potential and exceed it because you can really do anything you put your mind to. And I truly believe that today. A lot of it is fear, right? Just fear of the unknown, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of fucking up, fear of looking bad. And I want to get into this ego topic because I think, I got a message last night from one of our listeners, as I was mentioning, on Facebook, at Recovering Out Loud Pod. And I want to encourage people that are listening, if you have a question or you're going through something and you want us to talk about it, like, please, like, do this, because I was so inspired to do a podcast on this and I'm happy that you agreed to it. And the first thing you said to me was, oh man, I struggle with that so much, right? So I'm going to read this. This is from a user that I was talking with last night. Hi, I love what you're doing. Do you think you could do a show or have a discussion about how ego plays into addiction and recovery? A friend of mine is 2.5 years into sobriety. He uses recovery words and mantras, and on the surface seems to be changed in great ways. Unfortunately, when digging deeper, I realized he really isn't genuinely practicing key principles like accountability, humility, compassion, consideration for others, and consistency. He continues to only seek out people who give him attention and praise him. He shares at meetings in order to be looked up to and feel important. He'll say things and commit to action, but rarely does he follow through if he doesn't perceive a benefit for himself. He's unable to sustain relationships with people if they have boundaries, as he does not have control over those boundaries. And those boundaries often don't feed his ego, so he doesn't like that. And then the second part too, which this is the part I love, right? It's very easy to point fingers and there's a lot of finger pointing here, right? And I do this all the time, right? But the second part is, I just think there's something to be said about surrendering one's ego and when entering sobriety. I'm not an expert though, just like to share that idea. And then she goes on to say, I'm also wondering, and this is the part I really love, actually. I'm also wondering if you or your guests could offer insights on how to best support someone still thinking and acting through their ego in unhealthy ways, how to address it, validate progress, and show care without further perpetuating their facade, encouraging them to just be genuine and find balance in how they show up for both themselves and for others. I'm also curious about when, if ever, it is best to walk away if they avoid accountability or act inconsistently. Jesus, I can't read.
Sounds to me like she's describing an addict.
Yeah,
dude.
I mean, we're all like that, right? So I'll tackle this first, and then I'd love to hear your guys' experience with this. I want to preface this by saying I am not an ego expert. I am not an expert in addiction, right? And I think we kind of forget to mention that this is only my experience. I'm an expert in my experience, and I have a lot of experience with ego, my own ego, right?
Of course.
The first part of this I want to dive into is like, yeah, we know every one of us has that guy or girl where they're like, they come in, they're sharing about these like beautiful quotes they've heard, and you're like, oh man, that guy or girl really gets it. That person got it together.
Yeah.
Their recovery program is amazing, and they smile. And I was always told it's so easy to like show up at recovery meetings, at fellowship, at wherever, show up in group settings and like smile and nod and kiss babies, and you know what I mean? But the real work is as soon as you leave that room, right? That 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it is in the day, it's easy for me to go in there and be like, man, my recovery is great.
Yeah.
Everything's amazing. I'm tackling life. I have challenges, but they're not bothering me. Everything's great on the surface, and at the end of the day, yeah, it's ego. Like I that's how I relapsed the first time. I always say that I had this secret where I was using Adderall and other drugs, but I was managing my ADHD. That was my justification. I wasn't bouncing it off anybody. So I'd show up, I would say hi, my life's good, everything's great, and people that love and know me, right? And I wouldn't stay after, I would leave early, and I was checking the boxes, as I always say. I was checking the boxes, right? So yeah, we know this guy, right? The beautiful part here is that she's recognizing that she has a part too, and that's what I want to get into.
It
Is
sounds like she's actually a great person. She cares about her
right.
friends.
She
Yeah.
care, and so we'll get into the second part, but the first part is like, yeah, I can think of many people where I've gone in and been like, man, that fucking guy.
Has it all
Like
together.
but also too, when you get to know them, you're like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
this is bullshit.
Yep.
I can see right through it. You can feel the fake, right? And it always goes back to, for me, the resentment thing is like resentment, drinking. It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. What's my part? What's my part in this, right? And so when I'm sitting somewhere and I'm, whether it's in a meeting or anywhere, and I'm hearing someone bullshit and I can just feel the fake, it's like, well, how do I change my perspective of it?
Mhm.
For one, this guy is a great lesson into what I don't want to do, right? And also too, at least he's recovering or he's trying. You know what I mean? Like he's not out there drinking. That's another thing that I could look at. So, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll say this. To this day, like right now in my sobriety journey, ego is the biggest thing I'm struggling with.
Enemy, yeah.
No, I'm not struggling so much with the using. I've been clean, but I'm very lucky because I have a good circle of people around me, and all my friends know me. Like I don't really hang out with too many new people. The people that I am surrounding myself with they know me pretty well, right? So I'll use you for an example. If I'm come around you, which I don't, and pretend like everything is good, but if let's say I do come around you and I say some stuff that you don't necessarily agree with, you're gonna call me out and you're gonna say, hey, right? And I have other friends the same way. But right now, for an example I'll use is my job that I'm going back to, right? I feel 100% I'm going back to mining, which I did when I started when I was 18, right? But when I was in mining, the people that do know me, like my family, they're a little bit worried because I was using drugs, right? And I was surrounding myself with not so great people. So there are people that are worried, but my ego is so high. I'm like, have you not just watched what I've done for the last 6 months? I have a podcast. I went to rehab for 3 months. I'm living in Toronto. Like, you really think I'm going to use drugs now?
Yeah.
Right? That's my ego, though. That's 100% my ego, right? And it bothers me because, like I say, like I just want to like point to all these things that I've been doing, but that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, right? And that's why at the end of the day, it bugs me at the time, but I'm also very thankful I have those people in my life that keep me in check, right? But yeah, I will say this: I do go to some fellowship programs and meetings, and you can tell not clearly, but sometimes more clear than others when someone shares and says something, and they just sound very very fake. Where it's like in like the reading says about like the mantras and the way they talk and they sound so good on the outside, but like, can life really be that great? You know what I mean? And like, it can be great, but as I said, I believe in the last podcast or the one before that, I said, I just wanted people to know, especially people that know me personally that are watching this podcast now. I have a lot of people reaching out, right? And I just don't want them to think like, okay, on this date, I stopped using drugs and the last, 6-7 months of my life have been
perfect,
scot-free. That's not at all what's been going on. I mean, yeah, they've been great. I have a relationship with my family. I'm clean. I haven't been using drugs. I'm making new friends. Things are genuinely going pretty good, but like, there are things that pop up every single day, multiple times a day that aren't great. You know what I mean? That aren't great at all. And I'm vocal about that. But it does bother me to a certain degree when I see, and that's probably just my ego too, thinking, well, this guy sounds like an idiot. Why is he saying that? Why doesn't he just be real and tell us how you really feel, right? And I'm sure that guy's going through something that he's deep down inside that he doesn't want to put out there, right? Because maybe he thinks people are going to judge him, right? Because I know myself when I'm feeling a certain way about things, right? Like, I don't always feel comfortable sharing how I really feel. And that's been something I've struggled with my entire life because I don't want, Jimmy over there to judge me, right? Yeah. But sometimes it's a lot easier said than done. But I mean, I think for this person that sent us this, I think that it sounds like you really care about this person. Like, I think this person is really lucky to have you in their life. But
you think she's building a resentment though?
Yeah.
I think that's dangerous too, right?
So from what, I mean, it is great to care about your fellow, right? That's one of the promises, right? But at the same time, I think that if he's staying sober, if he's doing what he needs to do and he's staying sober, then that's good on him. She needs to do what she needs to do in order to stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
What he's doing and how he's doing it is none of her business.
It's a good
ultimately
point, actually.
Right? So I'm all about, it's great that, she reaches out and gives feedback to the pod and stuff like that. But my honest response is pray for him, man.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with her maybe having this conversation with him and being like, hey, like, is there anything you really want to talk about? Like, you know what I mean? Because I think what you're saying is 100% true as well. If this keeping the guy sober, great. You know what I mean? If you got to do 25 push-ups in a puddle of mud every day to stay sober, do it. I don't care what people think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that maybe this individual thinks there's something wrong with this guy or girl, whoever it is, and she's concerned that, you know, maybe that it'll get worse over time. I'm not too sure what the exact scenario is, but I think that this individual should maybe have a conversation before she builds a resentment, right? Because it's easy to build resentments. Yeah. But at the same time, I do think what you said is very true. If it's keeping this guy sober, if you got to go to a meeting every single day and say, my life is great, I love life, and it's going to keep you sober, go ahead and
at least
do
you're
it.
doing it.
At least you're doing it.
Yeah. And I always say this too, is like, just because I'm not enjoying this person's experience doesn't mean everybody else in the room isn't getting something.
Very true. Very true.
You know what I mean? I've been so many times where I've been like, that was terrible. I fucking hated that. Oh my God, I can't believe he said this again. And then the person beside me is like, that was the best fucking talk I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, they'll go up to them and be like, hey man, thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
I really
you saved my life today.
Yeah.
Something pretty interesting. Actually, his name is Johnny C too. Johnny C is one of my best friends in recovery. And I was going through a period where I was going to meetings and I was hearing lots of like trauma dumping, lots of negativity, to the point where I was like shelled away from sharing about my positive life, because life is going pretty good.
You felt bad, yeah.
And I felt like I feel bad saying my life is good, because I don't want these people to be like, you know, fuck you, your life, you know, my life isn't good. So as I called my buddy Johnny C, and he said to me, you know, you should not shy away from sharing nice. You should share how good it is, because that's going to encourage people to keep coming back, because maybe they want that, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I do go to, and when I do share, I genuinely try to keep it pretty positive, right? But, you know, sometimes I'll, like I just said the other night, I cared at a fellowship meeting. I said, I care too much about what people think, right? I said that out there, and you know, I didn't say, oh, like my life is shit, but I said, sometimes this is something I'm struggling with. Sometimes I care too much about what people think, blah, 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 right? But I do understand. I go to meetings all the time and I hear people.
So you know, going back, I think my response to the individual that sent in this message would be just to like take a step back, pray for your friend, right? Yeah. Check on your own recovery, you know, worry about your own recovery, and you know, God's got a plan, right?
Yeah, and who's to say that this individual is not going to change? Like, maybe he needs to go through this ego deflation process,
for sure.
And I guarantee you, there will be a person that will go up to him and be like, "Hey, you need to shut the fuck up," because that's happened to people that I know. There's people like that
100%.
That will go and be like, "You're not doing any good," you know, or you know, you need to check yourself, right? Like, and maybe he'll hear that one day and change. You know, you never know, right? I think it's important to know. I should have probably said this before, but I was looking up ego before I came in here, because I'm obsessed with this idea of ego deflation. I think it's extremely important. You know, one of the opposites of ego to me today is humility, right? Is being teachable, right? Going into every situation and not thinking, you know, the biggest feeder and fuel of ego for me today is I'm right. Yeah, but I'm right. Yeah, but those are like, those are so dangerous, right? When I'm taking criticism or someone's trying to help me and I'm like, yeah. No,
well, step one, right? Step one is we got to admit we are powerless. We need help. We cannot do this on our own. Mm-hmm. Ego is, I got this.
Yeah, I got this. There's another one. Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So if you, it's back into your self-centered, selfish, self-will lens, right?
Control.
Frame of mind. Control.
Yeah, this control idea.
Humility for me, humility has been a massive part for me. Like, being able to get comfortable in the uncomfortable has been a massive, massive part of my last 11 and a half months. Yeah. And that comes in conversations with loved ones, like some of my employees, you know, it's just, it's part of what I would call doing the work, right?
Yeah. I love that. It's, you know, and I wanted to mention too, is like, I was looking up ego, and, you know, there's a lot of definitions about it, but this guy, Ryan Holiday, writes a lot of books on stoicism, and he talks about ego as the enemy. He has a book called Ego is the Enemy, but he calls the ego as like a false or inflated, I'm paraphrasing this, sense of self, like a false inflated sense of self, where, you know, I think I'm more important than I am, or I have control, like we said, or I'm different, You know,
Yeah,
I'm not
rules
like you.
don't apply to me.
Yeah, I'm different. You know, and that's a dangerous thing too. We all come in here. Yeah, but you're not as bad as I was. Yeah, but you never did, you know, heroin, so you don't get it. You know, it's like, no, it's all the same shit, man.
Oh,
We use
100%.
drugs. A lot of us use drugs for the same reason, is to either change. For me, it's to change my inner state. It's simple as that. I use external things to change my inner state, right? So
And I think ego is such a like important thing to recovery, because I think a lot of people that are in recovery, especially after they get a few months under their belt, their ego just goes because they just went from being these empty, shallow human beings that everyone was so disappointed, and then especially at the beginning of your recovery, your family's so proud of you, your friends are so proud of you, you're starting to get some things back in your life, so you just feel like you are on top of the world, right? I know I did, and I think that's a huge part of the reason as to why my ego got so high, but. Because I remember I had this conversation with my father in the vehicle when he picked me up from rehab. We were driving to my family's house, and we had about an hour drive. And I was like, I had so much humility when I was in rehab, right? Because I love to help people in there, have conversations. And I'd really opened up to my parents about that in the vehicle ride. I'm like, I really liked the feeling of helping someone when I was in there. It felt so much nicer than putting someone down like I've done my whole life. I've always been an arrogant person. And I remember my father saying this to me. He's like, it'd be very easy to lose that humility being out here than it would be in there, right? And that's such a good point, because like since I've been out of rehab now, like I've gotten my jobs back, I've friends, hanging around women, going out and doing things, and I've lost a lot of my humility, right? And it's so easy to do that without even trying. It's so easy. And
My experience, and it's still to this day, is that people in my life, they trust me currently to be an alcoholic and an addict. So when that red carpet kind of like me expecting the red carpet to be laid out because I went to treatment, that wasn't my experience. But sometimes it hurts because on the inside how you feel and how different you feel. But the people that love you and that you've hurt the most, they still trust you to be, especially I'm not even a year, right?
yeah, they're still healing themselves. Yeah,
They still have to do their own healing,
yeah,
right? That's a huge part of my life
Yeah.
right now. There are people in my life that I love dearly that need to heal themselves. And everyone's doing at the end of the day, the people that you've hurt, in order to heal, they need to do what's best for them. Has nothing to do with me. And that hurts.
Yeah, that's tough.
That's
Yeah.
tough,
because
right?
we want to control and speed up the process, right?
it's like, I'm getting better. Why can't you get
yeah,
better?
yeah.
But at the same time, dude, at the end of the day, we're addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but I can speak for myself. I put a lot of people through hell.
Drag them through the mud. I always say that. Yeah.
If you were to look at my 2025, all the things that have happened to me in 2025, so 6 months and on in recovery, I have every reason to go back out and use. 2025 has been a tough year for me, but it's been humbling, and in that pain is where the growth happens, right?
Yeah.
So
pain is the touchstone of spiritual development, right?
100%.
You mentioned God, and I want to make sure that we don't really talk about God a lot on the show.
We don't.
But I want to get this out to, if that word bothers you, like the listener, that's okay. You know what I mean? I want to very clearly reiterate this, that for me, spirituality is not religion. It's not the same thing. It's very different, right?
100, yeah.
Spirituality for me is the answer to ego, which is what, I really wanted to get into. It's, I don't have the right answer, and that's okay. And I'm going to look to this God, this higher power that we talk about, as the guiding force, the inner teacher, right? First thought wrong, I was taught, in recovery. But it's like, a lot of people get really hung up on this God word because it's linked back to this Judeo-Christian, guy in the sky. And I'm happy you brought it up, because that's the answer to my ego today, is one of my favorite acronyms is ego is edging God out, right? EGO, edging God out. I love that. It's like, no, I've got this today.
Right.
Whatever you call your higher power, it could be the universe, it could be group of drunks, as people say, great outdoors, this kind of guiding force. It was and continues to be the most important thing in my life today, because at the end of the day, you're not always going to be there. for me. You're not always going to be there for me. My parents, my wife, they're not going to be there at the end of the day, I'm stuck with, do I pick up this bag of cocaine or this drink or whatever, or do I not? And nobody can make me do either one. I'm the only one, but I shouldn't even say that. I have to look to this like power of like, maybe I shouldn't do it this way. Maybe I should pause and ask for the right answer. And that's where prayer and meditation comes in, right? It's like, I'm not praying to this guy in the sky when I pray. It's basically, I'm just saying, hey, guide me through this. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. Help, show me the next right thing. And I don't expect it to like happen, as a miracle or anything like that. But what it does for me on a scientific level, and I'm not an expert again, but it puts me in this mindset of like trying to change, and it opens my mind to like other possibilities. And then what I find happens, and I'll finish my thought with this. What I find happens is God for me speaks through people, and people will show up in my life and like have an answer to my problem if I'm listening, right? The answers
100%.
are always out there. They're in here, but I have to listen to them and notice them, right?
Right. And so like a little like when I talk about my story, when I lost my father at the age of 22, and that's when I turned my back on anything bigger than myself. That's when I totally took over my own life. And look where it got me. Right? At the age of 22,
Wow.
I turned my back on spirituality. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I had that mentality of like, if there is something out there that's bigger, how can you put me through this?
Yeah.
How can you have taken my dad was like, Superman with a little Italian hat and a mustache and he was my Superman.
Your
but
hero, yeah.
and at the end of the day, like I let that one little thought, I let that control and spiral me out of control.
You hear that so much. I've heard lots of people say that, right? Like about the whole God thing. It's like, well, if God is real, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
So the cool part about sobriety is that I can now look back on certain things that have happened since I was 22, and I have awareness, which you can't have, which I didn't have when I was drunk and high. I have the awareness to now see that even after the age of 22, God was with me every single day the whole time. Certain things have happened in my life over the course of the last 20 years that I now have the awareness to say that he's been with me. He never turned his back on me, even though I chose to turn my back on him.
I ran away from God,
I'm going to say
right?
this because like, and I don't try and overthink the situation. I don't try and listen to too many things, but I just try and keep it real simple, because the second I start breaking it down and analyzing it too much, that's when I'm going to think,
you become this detective with like all the yarn and figuring out the murder.
To be honest, like I don't really care what works for someone else. I'm telling you what works for me. I remember this happened when I was in treatment. I heard so many people come in with sobriety and come tell us their story.
Every single person.
Every single person talked about God. And I just thought to myself, like, what if, Caleb, you actually don't know everything? And what if there is someone that's a little bit greater than you are? What if? Maybe if you just tried it, right? And I remember I took that thought and I ran with it. And I started praying, and the spirituality. I look.
That's
religion,
the squashing of your ego, right?
That's the squashing of my ego, right? Because, I mean, the type of person I was before I went into treatment and recovery, if you had ever told me I would have been praying to something greater than myself, I wouldn't even entertain the thought, right? Yeah. But the thing is because, like, truthfully, guys, I still struggle with it to this very day, being sober. Like, my arrogancy and my attitude, like, it's just chip on my shoulder, right? Like, it's something I struggle with. But that thought, the spirituality has really helped me. And I remember, shout out Dave W., he told me this. He said, religion is for people who don't want to go to hell, and spirituality is for people who've been to hell, he said. And I was like, wow, right?
And don't want to go back.
Yeah. And, I listen to lots of other podcasts, and one of my favorites is Joe Rogan. He talks about spirituality, and just there's something great about being connected with something and truly believing in something, right? And that's why I said at the beginning, if I don't try and depict it too much or analyze it too much or think about what other people are believing in, because then I start to overthink it, and I'm like, okay, this is all BS. I know what works for me, right? And like I said, I don't know if his name is God. I call him God. I don't know if he's white, black, yellow, red. I don't know if he's 7 feet tall or 5 feet tall. I don't know. And to be honest, it doesn't really mean anything to me. I'm just telling you that's how I stay connected every day. And there's just some type, it kind of goes back to the humility part, right? It brings humility in my life to just being like, okay, I toss my hands up.
Yeah. Wave the white flag.
I wave the white flag. I don't know everything. Help me. And the reason that I know I truly believe, and this is something that's kind of funny to me, is I remember when this has happened also in treatment. There was a situation going on, right, where I knew I shouldn't have been doing something, but I was doing it anyways because my heart was telling me to do it. And I remember people were telling me to pray about it. And I was like too scared to pray about it because they said the prayer that I used to say was just guide me, give me whatever guidance, whatever you think is right, make me do it. And I was too scared to say that because I knew the right thing.
I've done that.
I knew the right thing wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I wouldn't pray. I'd be like, no, if I ask him to make me do the right thing, then I'm not going to do what I want.
Yeah.
So that's how I know, okay, maybe you do believe, right? And that's just the strength of spirituality in my life today.
I love that. And that's why I say inner teacher. I heard that from somebody because it's like true. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. When you're doing something wrong, it just feels wrong.
Especially now, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
The more you stay sober.
My God consciousness now is pretty italic, bold, underlined. Like, I know that I feel today that, I have that God consciousness. That's, I feel blessed to know that I'm trying to do the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's all I could do, right?
I'm going to butcher this quote, but I was in Utah at my treatment center, and on the wall it said, I trust the process because I know the author. Right. And it's like, it's that blind faith of whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. And every single piece of adversity I've ever been through in my life, sober or in active addiction, I've been okay at the end. I thought I was going to die.
And if you're not okay, it's because the story's not over.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Right? You said it perfectly. I love the life is lived forward and understood in reverse. You look back now and you're like, oh, it makes sense now.
So like a lot like you touched on before. So when I went into treatment and I started to like have that, I was a little bit of clean time, a day, a week, a month. Everyone that had time, not so much quality time, but anyone who had time, what did they do? Yeah. What did they do? They joined a home group, right? They did the steps and they gave it back. And
service, yeah.
Right? And so that whatever their higher power is in my recovery, it's God. But if people were struggling with that, I would just tell them, I'm like, try my creator. Like, try using the word creator.
Yeah.
Something else that's not you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my whole life. I never listened to anybody. Right? I always thought that I knew best. And I got into treatment and someone told me to, start journaling. So I started journaling. Someone told me to, hey, pick up this book and read this. And I did that. All these people that have been through the program, they give these little like bits of information, and everything I've done has led me up to treatment, and pain. Now it's time to listen.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest part of why I can say that relapse today isn't a part of my story. It's because I've been able to listen.
Yeah. I love that. And you both mentioned this that I love too. And I said this the other day as well, is like, you hear all these people talking and you're like, no, but I have the answer. I'm right. Mm-hmm. Which I said earlier today. All you needed and all I needed too was that little window of willingness to be like, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe all these people aren't wrong. Maybe they're right. And maybe I'm the one that's wrong. And in that moment, it's like, yeah, your ego just shatters, right? Yeah. But then the next day it comes back because, you want things your way. And that guy's not driving the way that I want him to drive, right? And he just cut me off. And, all these things that happen that kind of bring it back, right? I want to touch on this. This is jumping out at me, but I love this. This is like red flags of ego and recovery. And we kind of talked about this, but if these things come up in my life, it's time to pause and be like, what's this about, right? Reluctance to apologize or take responsibility. Yeah, been there. Breaking commitments that don't serve the ego. So like not doing things because I'm not going to benefit from them. That's the opposite of service, in my opinion, is like only showing up to things where I'm going to benefit somehow, financially, morally, I'm going to get recognition, something like that. Alienating people who have healthy boundaries, right? So fuck that guy, when meanwhile they're just trying to create a boundary, right? And then and this is what I love, talking more than listening in meetings or in life, right? If I'm talking a lot, even on this podcast, sometimes when I catch myself talking too much, I'm like, maybe I should be quiet and listen to another perspective, right? And one more thing is the spirituality, the God thing for me too is just a little shift in perspective sometimes, right? Where it's like, hey, you're looking at the glass half empty all the time. Maybe, and you kind of just, maybe it's half full, right? Maybe it's half full, right? And it's just that window of like shifting perspective,
I always like that. I always like to think of this, right? It's like active addiction. You're on one side of a door, right? And freedom is on the other side of the door. So like everything you do, and going to treatment is like, or step one, admitting you were powerless. It's putting your hand on the knob. And then, you got to be able to start to believe in something bigger than yourself. And then doing all the work is what's going to get you to open the door and walk through it.
One step closer every time.
One step closer every time.
Jay talks about, depositing or withdrawing into your spiritual bank account, right? So I cut someone off in traffic, I just withdrew from my spiritual bank account. I hang out with using friends, just withdrew from my spiritual bank account. I go into a recovery fellowship and I ask someone how they're doing and actually listen, depositing into my spiritual bank account. Yeah. It's like, did I deposit more or am I in the negative today? Yeah. I can ask myself at the end of the day, right? I love that. I think too, what the other thing that I loved everything we talked about, but you mentioned, what's my part in this? We talked about that from this girl's perspective, right? I can't control what other people do or say ever. I've tried many times. I've tried to control a lot of things in my life, and that's ego again. You're not living according to my script. It's like the actor in the play that's trying to be the director, trying to be the fucking janitor, trying to be no, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it, and like, taking everyone's job, right? My job today is to be an agent of my higher power. That's it. Simple as that.
A vessel. I call it a vessel.
Yeah, I'm, like an employee almost, right? I'm not, I was taught by a mentor of mine to do God, spirit, higher power, to do God's work, not his job. It's as simple as that, right? Just do the daily work that's in front of me and leave the outcomes up to the universe, to the higher power, to God. Leave the outcomes, because I tried to control outcomes my entire life,
I honestly struggle with when I do pray and meditate, one of the constants in my prayer morning and night is I ask God if I'm doing this right. Am I doing this right? Am I being held? Am I holding myself accountable? Am I living in his will? And then I can't really explain it, but at the same time, I catch myself when I'm not, right? And having that awareness, being able to have that awareness, to be able to take a step back. There's times where I'll be at work where I'm just like, I need 5 minutes. I'll go sit in my car, turn the radio off, and I'll just like 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes alone just to give myself that spiritual reset. That's how simple of a person I am. Yeah. I need to almost do this in like minute by minute, 5 minute, 10-minute, hour when I can.
See, for me like that. I like that's how that's your coping mechanism, right? For me, I have like my coping mechanism. Let's say something's bothering me throughout the day. I call someone, and I got about like 4 or 5 people that I'll call, right? And unfortunately, sometimes they don't tell me what I want to hear. You know, sometimes they'll tell me I'm wrong, or sometimes they'll be like, "No, what? You're actually right. That guy's, you know, he's
He's
in the
out of
wrong.
line.
He's
Yeah.
out of line, right?" But I find that helps me so much because it goes back to like my will and my power. I did never used to do that. When something would arise in my day, I would deal with it exactly how I thought I should deal with it, right? But now, I think that's one of the things that helps me most is the people, like my circle of people,
Yeah, your fellowship
my
for sure.
fellowship, right?
Yeah.
And people that I've met that have just become really important players in my life now. That I'll call them and I'll be like, Anthony can attest to this. I probably call this guy so much he probably thinks about blocking my phone number. I call him all the time.
Only once. No, I'm
right?
kidding.
And yeah, sometimes, and it's still it's still sometimes I'm like, fuck, this is kind of like, I almost feel embarrassed to talk about this. You know, I don't even, what's he gonna think? Like, and this is one of my best friends here, right? And sometimes I'm like, oh man, what's he gonna think if I ask him about this? But you know what? Who cares? Because after I talk and I get that out there, he tells me back whatever he thinks, and I bounce a couple ideas off of him, and then I call another person, and at the end of the day,
You find the solution.
I find the solution
Yeah.
through my peers, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the greatest things in recovery for me because I never ever had that ever before.
Is that not praying though? Like it's
And-
it's a power greater than yourself. Your circle of people is
Mhm.
a power greater than yourself. That's another way to, you know what I mean? It's not exactly praying, but it's another form
Mhm.
of like not acting on ego. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And trust me, like I said, that's probably the biggest thing I struggle with is my ego.
Yeah.
100%. That's a very cool message that you
Yeah,
got last night.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to say this, like any more messages that you can shout out to us or you want us, even just a topic you want us to talk about. Cause you know, I know that this was big in your life and it affects a lot of people. Right. So hopefully something we said here can help one person. I always try to think like that.
Mm.
And my ego always like on the way down here, I'm like, oh man, I hope this episode blows up. You
Yeah.
know? And it's just like, I just want to look cool.
And I
right?
want to mention too to the people watching, I appreciate, and I know Anthony appreciates so much all the positive messages. I've gotten so many of them. Every time a video goes out, I get so many messages from especially from like my hometown,
Yeah.
and like they never get old. And sometimes I'm not the greatest at responding to all of them. I try, but like it does mean so much, and
Yeah.
it's crazy about like some of them aren't even addicts, but some of the things we talk about on this podcast are they're like, wow, I actually feel that way sometimes too, or I know someone who
it's
feels
mental
this way.
health, man.
Mental health, right?
Crosses.
And I'm someone, just to get this out there, I'm someone who like shunned on mental health before I went to treatment and got help. I thought mental health was fake. You're just being a bitch.
In denial, yeah.
Man up. That's what I thought, right? Until I realized, like, no, like you struggle with mental health, right?
Every day.
Every single day. So
Let's end with this. Johnny, what would you say to the person struggling in self-will right now? Or even, you know, something that helps you get out of self-will? I know we talked a lot about it, but one final thought maybe.
I think I've learned that our fellows who aren't in active addiction or even that might be in recovery or in active addiction, they're sick people too.
Yeah.
So we're able to understand and know that as long as we try to do our best to live in God's will and not our own, that we can pray for those people that are still trying to figure it out on their own, and just I can trust that God's got a plan for them.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah.
So that's what, honestly, that's where my recovery is simplified to at this point. It's just that because there's one of these guys in every home group.
Yeah, everywhere you
In
go.
every home group.
yeah.
Even the world. Yeah.
Right. And so
Outside.
and so you can spot them. You spot them right away. But to our role is to be able to bring anyone we can through an active service, bring anyone can closer to their higher power, and pray for them. And that's as simple as I can put it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Johnny. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. When I got the invite to do this, and it was just the way our outside world's connected
Yeah,
and
it
stuff
was
like
funny.
that, I was like, you know what, this is. I'll be honest with you. About a month ago, the thought of actually, probably right around the time that we met, the thought of not going public with my recovery, but at the same time doing a little bit more than meetings or sponsoring, or, you know, the thought of being able to go out there and just try to, if this one episode helps one person,
That's what he says all the time.
we did our job.
Yep.
So I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone. I'm sure there's going to be people that have no idea about my recovery that are going to watch this episode and tune in. And, I'm a grateful alcoholic and addict because everything that's happened in my life up to this point has led me to where I am today. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Thanks for listening. Please help us grow the channel and like, share, and subscribe for more content. The discussions and stories shared on this podcast are for informational and motivational purposes only. This content is not a substitute for professional medical advice, addiction treatment, or therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please consult a licensed physician, addiction specialist, or mental health professional. You are no longer alone.